Hey Lukman. Hi Aruni. Hey Achut.
Hi, sir.
Nice. Let's get some more cameras on. Hey Akash. Hi Anita. Hi Kranti. Anita, watching your background is making me feel cold right now because it's so cold outside in Hyderabad. I'm just like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's so cold here.
So you are in Chennai, right? Or where are you?
Chan Chandigarh, just the opposite.
Okay, yeah.
Chennai.
तो वहां तो बिल्कुल
Chandigarh.
आपका तो मजा ही मजा है. It's like,
हाँ,
all
like
right, let's get some more
AC
cameras
fridge.
on, guys. Okay, so today, I'm going to be giving a little bit more feedback on resumes. And, I've been looking at a bunch of resumes, and I think the biggest challenge that I find is, there's a lot of hit and miss advice that is being given on resumes, and I really want to structure it so you can start thinking about how to write your resume and how to create it and put it in a way that positions you in the best possible light. Okay. So, for a lot of the folks, the fact that they're sharing their resumes does not necessarily mean that they're looking for jobs, but rather it is, my argument is that we should be writing a resume every month. So you just basically go have a running list of what did you achieve this month? What problem did you solve and how did you solve it? And you keep adding on to it. And so at some point when you're looking to apply for a job, you select the components that you want to kind of highlight that highlight it the best, and you put those elements in your resume. Okay. And so from that perspective, just because we are looking at a resume does not mean that, folks are looking for a change, but rather it's an ongoing process. So let's start the presentation, Shravani. We have about 5 resumes to evaluate, and each one of these are different and there's a different perspective to it. And each one of these have like different people have given different advice. So I want to kind of start, thinking about what the best way to do it is. So, okay. So for those of you, as usual, we're going to be streaming this live on YouTube, but we'll not be taking questions from YouTube at this point. However, for those of you that are seeing there, my name is Prasad. I've, been in the industry for almost 25 plus years, worked with pretty much all the big names in the industry. I've also co-founded UX Reactor, which is an Inc. 5000 company, got a bunch of patents. And I've also hired and built teams around the world. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to be sharing that part of my expertise in terms of how does a hiring manager look at these resumes and how do you need to craft and think about your resume. So a few of you obviously want to be, a few of you want to be, are going to be speaking up and talking about it, but there are also a few of the folks that do not want their name to be shared, or they want to be private. And so what we've done is we've anonymized the resumes to the best of our ability, so that we can still give feedback, meaningful feedback, without necessarily talking about the individual. So let's go on to the next slide. So one thing for all of you that are watching, please subscribe so you can get started. We have a lot of content that comes on a regular basis that's talking about the UX discipline, and also how to think about design, how to get into jobs, and then how to kind of build your career. So this is the place where, if you're interested, do subscribe so you can get started. Let's go on to the next slide. All right. So we've talked about this before, and I want to just anchor everybody back in terms of how your resume is going to be consumed. So your resume, the way your resume gets consumed is there are going to be different parts of the process. So there is a recruiter, there's a technical screening, there's a design task that might be given, and there's probably an online or a remote interview, and then you get the offer. So your resume is probably going to be engaged, people will look at it at a recruiter level, at the technical screening level, as well as at the interview level. So those are the stages. And when you look at the design task, the resume is not what you're looking at. You're probably looking at the person's execution of a task. So our resume has to pass each of those three stages: the recruiter, technical screening, and then it needs to be juicy enough so that when you are in an interview, somebody can take that and have a conversation with you. Okay, so those are the three goals that we have. Now let's go on to the next slide. Okay, now when you go and talk to somebody, they are also trying to figure out how senior you are. What is your level of thought? And so when you're looking at the hiring process, they are basically at each of the steps, people are looking at, when you're talking to the recruiter, they're looking at just the terms, right? So do you have Adobe? Do you have like a tool competence? What kind of projects have you done? What kind of problems have you solved? So those are the things that the recruiter will probably look at. They'll have a bunch of keywords that they're going to look at. And, when you're talking at the technical screening, it's basically whatever you've written, is that real or not? And then finally, when you're doing the interview, it is basically looking at the soft skills and the cultural skills and the assessments that would come around that. So these are the three places. And not just that, when somebody is talking to you during an online remote interview, they're trying to decide, okay, is this person, able to do widgets? Where somebody is telling them make this widget and they're going to do it, or is this person, can I give them a screen and say do the screen, or can I tell this person a problem and they can solve the problem, or can I tell them like this is my intention, and then can they go do their research and figure out the intent level stuff, right? So these are the different levels of communication that the other person, the interviewer, is looking at what level of seniority are you coming in. And that's what happens at the remote interviews component, or the remote or the on-site. Let's go on to the next slide. Okay, so today we are basically going to look at 4 or 5 resumes depending on how much time we have. And again, all of these, do not worry about which company somebody has worked at. Do not worry about their names and all that stuff. We'll just say applicant A, applicant B. Now, if somebody does want to share and talk, we'll definitely have that conversation. But otherwise, let's not worry about specifically what they've done. Let's look at how they've represented themselves. So let's go on to the first resume. Okay. So this is resume 1. Literally, this is what I have. So let's zoom into it. Okay, so literally what is jumping out at me is, and again, this is something that you want to keep in mind, is what kind of companies will get attracted when they see your resume. Okay, so when we're looking at this, it says I'm a user experience designer who thrives on high impact spaces and ambitious teams. Great. Okay, then I'm basically going to look at tools. It says, okay, this person got Figma, Adobe XD, Sketch, Illustration, and then they seem to have all the right skills in place. So I'm just looking at the bolding, because if you bold something, that's probably what I'm going to jump at. So this is what the recruiter is looking at. So the recruiter says, okay, yeah, they have the interaction design, contextual inquiry, survey, interview, empathy mapping, storyboarding, wireframing, prototyping, motion design, and all that stuff. Okay, good. So they do seem to have all the right terminologies in place. Okay. Then the next thing that they're looking at is, wait a minute, they don't really have a lot of experience in place. So if you look at it, it's very sparse. And so that is probably the first hint that the recruiter is going to get, is this person may not be as senior as, as they want or expect or whatever. So then they're looking at intern. Design intern is November to December. So that's probably 1 month worth of work. And March through today. So if you're talking March till today, March, April, May, June, July is probably about 8 or 9 months. Okay. So this person on the whole has less than a year worth of experience. And as I look at this, is a gym management software which caters. So, when I'm looking at the first job that this person at company 1, it says, and I'm not even going to look at the description, I love working closely with technology and our society and people. I'm not going to look at that, because everybody has these aspirational statements that for a recruiter do not mean anything, because a recruiter is accountable for looking really at what did this person do. So, it just basically tells me that they did something on a software that helps them maintain finance, inventory, staff members, and information. And it is used by gym members. So that's all I know. But I really don't know what they did. Okay. And when I look at the internship experience, it basically says it's it's a service that promotes Ayurvedic, naturopathy, yoga, wellness stuff, and provides internship to tech and non-tech. So that is kind of a disconnect, because I'm saying like, well, are you promoting healthcare or you're promoting jobs? So it's a little bit of a disconnect. So again, when I look at this, it seems to me like, this person did not really spend a lot of time solving any kinds of problems or whatever, but they probably understand something at a tool level. And that's what the recruiter's mindset is. And then if once it moves to a technical review, they will probably say, yeah, if they're looking for freshers or junior level people, yes, maybe this resume would get a call. But otherwise, it would be really hard to get a call. My recommendation for this resume, and again, is, let's talk about what you've done, what problems have you solved, what outcomes have you driven in the company, because that is really important. Because when you say, yeah, I created this, I created this product, or I did this under the guidance of so-and-so, whatever, it tells me that they know specifically what work was supposed to be done and how they did it. And so I kind of get a sense of, okay, they really did something. But without that sense, it kind of makes me feel like this person may or may not have the experience. And even if they had like amazing experience, they're not actually selling it on this resume. And so that is that's probably the largest feedback that I would give for this resume is, put some more context in terms of what you did for company 1 and company 2, so that you're able to build it up. And then also make sure that, if somebody were to ask like, okay, in a technical interview, then, okay, you did storyboarding. So I should be able to understand, okay, if you did storyboarding, then, more likely than not, you did it in either company 1 or company 2. So what exactly did you do that involves storyboarding? Right. So there needs to be some kind of a connection so people can look at it and they can kind of get over the questions that they have when they're looking at the resume, at least as a technical review process. But as of now, I would say the odds of this getting past a technical review process are very, very low as it is right now. But if you add it in and put a little bit more meat on it, this would be really valuable. Let's go on to the next resume. Okay, now this is actually a really fun resume for me because, the first thing that jumps out at me is the experience synopsis. I look at the experience synopsis and they're like, oh, wow, this is awesome, right? This person tried to synthesize everything that they did, and I really don't need to spend a lot of time. Okay, now when I look at the bottom below that, it just kind of is like, okay, so the key highlights are this individual designed 2 web applications for a B2B audience, right from ideation to full service hybrid using Angular and Bootstrap. And that's when I'm like, wait a minute, there's something going on here, because they're saying with using Bootstrap with MySQL, including 20 plus pages with 40 plus assets. And I'm like, is this person an engineer or a designer, right? And again, for a type 3 company, they're looking for a designer, right? They want somebody who understands that. Whereas, if you were to go for a type 2 company or a type 1 company, sorry, they would actually look at this and say, okay, maybe I want an engineer as well. So that might appeal for type 1 companies and lower type 2 companies. But higher type 2 companies and type 3 companies, this would actually raise a bunch of flags. Okay, so then they say, okay, you interacted with the client leadership, ideated, research, but that's the whole problem is, you talked about all the technology in the key highlights, but then now you're talking about design, but you've confused the person. Maybe you did both, but at the end of the day, this is not a UX-centric experience that I'm getting. So I kind of question like, okay, what did you really do? And that is where, and again, let's scroll down a little bit. Yeah. So then this is where I'm going to actually stop and scroll right down to the bottom. And I'm saying, okay, let me actually understand where they worked, which companies they worked and what titles they had. So let's scroll down to the bottom and then let's zoom in a little bit. Okay. So I'm seeing, okay, all right. So company 3 that they worked at was HTML designer, visual designer. So they spent about 4.5 years doing that. Okay, so this person is predominantly a computer science person, a programming person. Then they spent about slightly more than a year being a visual designer. And then this is very fascinating. So then their most recent experience, and they're claiming a 10-year experience, they're saying they are a UI UX designer and WordPress developer. And that is a big red flag for me, because it just seems to me like they do not have, I mean, again, if I'm trying to hire a 10-year plus experienced person into a UX role, I'm expecting a certain level of maturity coming in. And when I look at this, and the moment they say WordPress developer, and just to be, back of the mind, I'm thinking, yeah, okay, even if they did 50% development, 50% designing, they have 2 years of experience and 1 year and 3 months as a visual designer. So they really have about 3.5 years of experience, right? And so that is actually positioning me as, okay, maybe they're not as senior because there is a problem somewhere there, right? And then I'm looking at the certification, and again, I see WordPress certification is not relevant, right? Why would a designer want to do WordPress certification unless they're curious about it? But it's not relevant. There's a German language, which, okay, tells me that they have some diversity, could potentially work with some international clients, maybe. But I'm not for or against it. It's neutral as far as I am concerned. And then I'm looking at MCM, IMCC, and I really don't know what that is, right? And I might just do a Google search if this resume interests me sufficiently. But otherwise, I would leave it at that. And then I'm looking at expertise is web design, UI, UX design. And that's where, again, when you say UI, UX design, it's the same thing as saying, you know what, I am a doctor and a compounder. It's a very Indian kind of an example, but are you a senior or a junior? I mean, you have to be very careful in how you're saying it. Either you're a UX designer or you are a UI designer, but you can't be both, because UX designer includes UI design as well. So there is that. And again, this is where this individual claims they're intermediate. And that kind of also gives me the same sense. Oh yeah, they really have 3.5 years of experience. It's intermediate. Okay, I get it, right? They're not very senior. And this is the first step where, the resume itself is kind of self-defeating in that sense, because it's making, the more I read, the more their seniority goes down. Okay, then I'm looking at mobile design advanced, but again, what in mobile design? Iconography is advanced, content writing. But, again, if you're doing mobile design and you're doing iconography, those are pure visual. I mean, mobile design, I don't know what aspects of it you've done, but iconography is a pure visual kind of a thing. Research is intermediate. So there are a lot more questions that I have than there are answers about this individual. And this is something that we have to be really, really careful. And again, even from a recruiter perspective, the recruiter, if they're trained to think about resumes, what they will do is they'll do exactly that. They will calculate 3.5 years of relevant experience is what they will write, and they'll send it across. Okay. Now, when I'm looking at the tools, it looks like, yeah, probably all the tools, Adobe Photoshop, Illustrator, XD, but Photoshop and Illustrator usually are more pure visual designer folks, and Adobe XD and Figma, and those guys are the more contemporary UX design kind of tools. And so again, just by looking at the tools, I can say, yeah, okay. So this is also something that, when you list them in order of importance, the most important to the least important. So ideally, if this person would have said Adobe XD, Figma, Photoshop, Illustrator, it would have been much more effective in communicating, okay, they probably understand UX. But when you kind of put it in this sense, it's really hard for me to kind of figure out. And especially this resume, I would, if you're applying for UX jobs, saying that, WordPress, HTML, CSS, or Corel, I mean, Corel is like a long ago kind of a product. I mean, even putting that is unnecessary. It is distracting at best. So I would say be very careful in terms of what you share and what you do not share. Okay. Now let's scroll back up. So again, there is nothing wrong I mean, honestly, when I look at it, okay, you have 3.5 years of experience. I respect that. Okay, if you have 3.5 years of experience, let's actually look at what you did for those 3.5 years of experience. So now let's look at the jobs that this individual has done. Okay, and this is where my discomfort comes in. So let's scroll back up to the top. Yeah, so synopsis, right? There is something fundamentally wrong with the synopsis. When I read it for the first time, I really appreciated it. But then I kind of felt very uncomfortable about this individual because I wasn't really sure. I couldn't explain why I was uncomfortable with this synopsis, right? And I'm like, okay, what is in here? So there is like, branding, UI, UX, visual design, adaptive design, and web. Okay. And I'm basically looking at B2B websites, mobile applications, edtech, real estate, windmill, e-commerce. Okay. And I'm kind of struggling because I think when the more I thought about it, it was like, okay, so UI, UX, visual design, adaptive, and web were somehow not UI, UX. I mean, for me, all of those things are UI, UX, right? And so, if you're designing for adaptive experiences, that's great. Okay, so then the classification should be similar, right? So it's like, okay, you did it for desktop applications, you did it for mobile applications or different form factors, or maybe that is something I can understand. But you're not talking about form factors, you're talking about disciplines. So you're mixing form factors with disciplines, with UI, UX, and so that classification did not make sense to me. Right? Is everybody clear on that? Why I got confused on this classification? Just type in yes, and so I can continue. Otherwise, it kind of, I want to make sure that you understand. Okay, cool. So what I would have loved is I like this idea of putting an experience synopsis table. However, why not, instead of saying, B2B websites, mobile applications, and again, edtech, because again, if you say mobile applications and edtech, mobile applications again is a form factor, whereas edtech is a domain, right? So I would actually I would actually love it if you said, branding, visual design, interaction design, research, and then you just checked off on that. That would just basically, oh, wow. So this person has done something across the whole gamut of the experience, right? And I don't really need to worry about it. And then there is these numbers in the brackets, and I really don't know what that means. Is it 8 years, 2 years, 2 years? So now this is where the problem is like, if I look at 8 years and then I go back and you said, well, you did really 3.5 years of work in design, then what did you really do for 8 years? Of those 8 years, what part was design, what part was engineering? And so those are the kinds of questions that kind of get kicked off when you're thinking about it. So my advice would be, drop the number of years. You don't really need to talk about the number of years. Just basically focus on interaction, visual, research, and content and branding and stuff like that, and then just get that synopsis done, and that will itself be like really awesome, right? And then the other question in the Y coordinates, which is like, should I put edtech, real estate, windmill? I think that's okay. I think it is fine. You can also talk about mobile versus desktop versus something else, like different platforms, because I don't think anybody is, or probably there may be few people that say, I want to hire a designer with experience in edtech, right? But it is a relatively understood kind of thing that, designers can work between domains. But the kind of questions people will ask is, hey, do you have experience designing mobile experiences? Or do you have experience doing desktop applications? Or do you have experience doing B2B? Right? Or do you have experience doing B2C? So I think those kinds of questions is maybe you might want to do a synopsis around, is like, okay, what kind of domain, what kind of background, and then you kind of talk, okay, yeah, I did B2B branding, I did B2C branding, or I did, research or interaction for these domains. I think that would be really, really interesting. But that synopsis is a great idea, but with different X and Y coordinates. And then when we're looking into the product details, I think the key highlights should actually focus on what is the problem the product was solving, Okay, don't talk about MySQL 20 plus pages, because again, that's also seniority thing. Are you worried about features, widgets, or are you worried about the problem that you solved? Okay, so you might say, you know what, the large infrastructure engineering solution company. So this application focused on allowing engineering projects to be executed seamlessly with minimal human intervention. So that's an interesting problem statement, or that's a problem that this product was solving. And then you can talk about, well, what I did was I interacted with client leadership to understand, ideate, research about the product and kind of build on it. And then so that makes it a lot more valuable. And then if you go down to the next one, large infrastructure and engineering solutions company, key highlight is designing a native mobile application for tablet and mobile devices across 10,000 concurrent field staff. Again, I would actually say, what is the problem, right? It is designing a product where multiple people are interacting with the system, with a very dynamic system, right? And you want to make sure that data is always accurate and up to date for everybody at any point in time. That is the design problem you're trying to solve. And so you basically say, and I love the fact that in this case, the person said, I helped reduce the time by 20%, because that's an outcome. So if you, instead of said, this is what I did, but you can also put another section that says, what was the outcome? And I reduced it by 20% or 30%. That is awesome, because that is like really, really good. It'll give you the credit. So, I think this resume overall was kind of hitting it, but it was kind of missing it, because there were a lot of other noise that confused people. And that is where, it caused more questions to come up. And in the end, it defeated itself. But there were a lot of winning elements in this resume. Now let's go on to the next resume. Okay, now this is the same resume, but as the same individual, but they redid a little bit of it. But what was interesting was they took out the summary because, they felt that they took advice from somebody, and, that other designer gave them feedback and they felt this is who I am. But my argument is, the table was awesome. Just redo it and make it like a little bit more easy to understand, and, the classifications more design centric. And then you basically, when you come into the project details, it's like, problem statement, client was unsatisfied, we were unable to generate enough. I think these can be outcomes, right? Because the problem statement is, what problem is the product trying to solve? And then these were the outcomes. Like, okay, the client, we got a high satisfaction rating on that. Or, we got a lot of adoption, because clearly they were not able to generate enough queries through the website. So by redesigning it, we made it very easy for customers to query the website, or we reduced the usability issues. I think these can be outcomes, the problem statements that you have written here. And then we can basically look at, this is also another aspect, problems you identified through research. Logo has 7 colors and all that. And I think the idea here is the negative on this is, this is a very verbose and a very long resume. So nobody would have the attention span to read everything. However, if you were able to reduce it to a few elements and say there was too much noise, or we did usability testing and all that, I mean, you can kind of define that and you say, this is how we solve the problem, and this is why we know that this problem was important. I think that would solve the problem. So in this example, I would say cut down the words. And, for every project, you should not go more than, let's see, 1.5 inches. Right? I mean, just as a rule of thumb, it's like no more than 1.5 inches, but you should be able to communicate what problem you're solving, why that problem was important, and then what the outcome was. And if you just write that, but interestingly, I did not say how you solved it, because that is what the people in the technical interview would do, is they'd call you in and they say, okay, how did you solve this? And the moment they ask you that question, now you know all the answers and you are able to answer it. Okay, so that's what I would advise on this. Okay, but again, this also is kind of it's going in the right direction, but we need to make it very, very tight so people look at it and they understand it very, very quickly. Let's go on to the next one. Okay, now this one is kind of fun, because it's kind of similar to the previous one, but it's also like very, very complex in certain ways. So if we could zoom in on this a little bit. So what this individual did, and is this person, right? This is Sai. So Sai, do you want to very quickly explain what you were thinking?
Yeah, so I just wanted to have some like proof of work in the resume, like what all things I have done. And yeah, like I just wanted to illustrate my experience of working in design. So yeah, in just if I would say that, um, yeah, that was the intent behind this.
Right. So I really like this for one reason was you were trying to summarize it, but really it ended up becoming way more complex than necessary because now you said what is responsibility set A and responsibility set B, right? So then when you look at company 4, responsibility set B was not defined. Accomplishments were not defined for company 3 and 4. So that is actually, the absence of information catches your eye more than the presence of information. Right. And so that is where it's like, wait, what is going on? But, the information too is really, really dense. And so it's very, very hard for people to kind of figure out like, okay, well, what were you trying to achieve in here? And like, did you really do it? So when you said accomplishment design required 20, now I don't know what that 20 means, right? Screens 100 plus. Okay, so if you did 100 plus screens, but what problem did you solve, right? And did it really require 100 plus screens? I don't know, right? Design approval rate, 8 out of 10. So does that mean like 8 out of 10 designs were approved, like 8 out of 10 screens that you did were approved and about 20% of your screens needed redoing? So again, always kind of think about this in terms of like, okay, this is something that we are following within, our program as well. 1 second, 3 seconds, and 30 seconds, right? Can people look at it and understand in a second that you were successful? Okay. Or that you did a really awesome job? Or do they have to read and figure out that you did an awesome job? Yeah. So the more effort that somebody needs to read it, that is where people will struggle with and trying to figure out like, okay, yeah, I don't really understand what this is, right? And I do appreciate that the fact that you put learning, hands-on experience on ticket task, edit. But I think most companies, when they're looking at it, they are more interested in what you have achieved, right? What was the outcome that you achieved for the company? So, meeting deadlines, collaborating, understanding requirements, design, critiquing, and learning from mistakes is not really a learning, right? I mean, it's not what you've achieved for the company. So it makes me a little bit scared. Like, okay, so wireframing, prototyping, user task flows, okay, these are all artifacts. You've done artifacts. But really, why did you do those artifacts? I have no idea. What problem were you solving? I have no idea, right? Were you thinking at a feature level, at at a screen level, at an experience level, or at an intention level? I have no idea. Right? And so it becomes really, really hard for a hiring manager to look at it and kind of determine whether you have the appropriate experience or not. Right. So, and when I look at conversation, and again, because you've done the table format, I'm just going to spend maybe about 30, 40 seconds or maybe a minute and a half to try and figure out what it is. And then at the end of the day, I'm going to say none of the data in here makes sense, right? It doesn't make sense because I cannot evaluate your skills in any meaningful manner. So if you say issues identified 11, redesign 3, query resolution 7, customer satisfaction 60 to 65%, product upsell 5. Now, I don't understand like what does a 5 mean, right? Did you increase it? Did you reduce it? What happened, right? So I think none of these accomplishments are, easy enough for me to interpret what you did or what you achieved. And that is a huge challenge, Sai. And then the other important thing is you have terms like LX designer. Now, what is an LX designer? I took some time to kind of think about it. And then I'm like, oh, okay, you're creating some kind of a learning experience. So you were probably like an instructional design kind of work is what I assumed. Is that correct? Sai?
Yeah, Yeah, true.
Yeah. And now again, instructional design, how is it relevant to a UX role that somebody's going to look at? Right? So that is the challenge that I'm having. Now let's scroll down. Okay. Now, this is where I'm looking at it like, okay, looks like you have all the right tools in place. Okay, good. But this is, and then I see functional expertise is UX design, UX research, UX writing. But your resume does not reflect that level of maturity that you want to kind of communicate. Right. So this is where I think, again, this resume is hurting you more than it is helping you. Okay. So what I would actually, and scroll down, and that whole concept of I declare here with that all the furnished details are true. I mean, drop that. It doesn't even help. You don't even need to talk about it. That's real estate that you could have used for something else. Okay. Now, certifications is CDI, conversation design, brand marketing by Sai Ganesh, growth hacking by Vaibhav Sineseti, product-led growth by Ishan and Rushil, FS web development. And again, you've done growth hacking, which is marketing, brand marketing is marketing, then product-led growth by, I don't know if that is like a product design or something else. Web development you've done, and conversational design is probably the one thing that may be relevant. But again, the other 4 certifications, I really don't know. And again, keep in mind that, saying by Sai Ganesh or Vaibhav Sineseti or Ishan and Rushil, like nobody knows who these guys are, right? I mean, again, maybe I'm out of sync with the Indian market, possibly. But I would actually be curious about what you've achieved more than the specific certifications. I would just say certifications in brand marketing, CDI and all that, and forget the names. Don't talk about the names, right? But you should be able, and again, one thing I do say is never put anything that you cannot defend on your resume. You should be able to talk about it. And again, never tell a lie on your resume. Yes, in the short term, it might give you a job, but would you rather that you get a job that reflects your abilities, or you go into a job and then you're always worried about what your boss thinks about you because you're not able to figure out what they want, right? So my advice is do what you know and present it, and then build on top of that. Now, learning roadmap is building web apps, motion design for UI, wearable and audibles in VR and UX. And I don't know what TBS means. I'm assuming if it's to be started, why do you even want to write it, right? Again, that's real estate, that's wasted, isn't it? So I would rather that, you take the first part, the first page, and fill it out a little bit more, right? I don't need to know what your hobbies are. And again, see, I would love to know your hobbies or your background or what you want to learn, your aspirations. If I think you can be a good contributor to my team, okay? If I don't know you're a good contributor or not, then none of this makes sense to me. I'm just going to ignore it and move on, okay? So my advice is at the resume level, you don't really need to talk about your languages as long as you are able to communicate, like you're able to communicate in English for that job, or you're able to communicate whatever language that job requires, it's fine, right? You don't really need to talk about, I know all these languages. You don't need to talk about hobbies. You don't need to talk about learning roadmaps and all the other stuff. Okay. So focus on the page 1 that you have. Simplify it. And specifically, again, my formula is, well, what was the problem you were solving, right? How do you know that problem was good? Again, if you did research, how do you know that problem was what it is and what were the outcomes? I think that in itself is good. And you can say, and you can always talk about what tools you've used, what from the previous one, what your level of expertise is in different methods or different techniques. I think those would be good. Okay. Now, what is interesting is you could say I've done workflows, wireframes, and all that stuff. That doesn't make sense to me. You can say interaction design, visual design, because those are larger buckets. Okay. Or you can say usability testing, qualitative research, quantitative research. That makes sense. But never talk about like an artifact. Talk about methods and techniques, because people would be interested in the methods and the techniques. Okay. Does this make sense, Sai?
Yeah, absolutely. I had one query. So in the responsibility set, as you said, like
Mhm.
we have to mention uh, like methods rather than like artifacts. So
Mhm.
methods would be little broader, and if I mention artifacts, then it's like keeping it specific to what I have done. And yeah,
Right.
yeah. So
So yeah, I'm glad you asked that question. So when I say methods and stuff like that, put that under expertise and skills. Okay. If you say functional expertise is UX and UX design, I really don't know. It is really broad, you know.
okay,
And I don't know what in UX design you know and what you do not know, isn't it? So
right.
put those elements down below. But here, when you're talking about, okay, what you did for company one, okay, I would just be very curious about, okay, what was the problem you were solving and how did you, and, what did you solve and how, and what were the outcomes that you had, right? That is the basic stuff that you want to do. And you want to say, I did, interaction design or whatever, the high level explain how you solved it, but don't go into the details. Let the details come out in the interview when you're talking to the technical individuals.
Sure, got it. And also, like how you said, we have to mention uh, like what kind of work we have done in terms of uh, yeah, from the design aspect. Then is it good to mention like what kind of I mean, it's like a client details. So like I was talking about last time, this is regarding uh, I mean, how to showcase the design that I have worked for the client
Right.
in a way so that it doesn't hurt the client and the company where I'm
Correct.
working for.
So, and I really appreciate that you worry about confidentiality because that will definitely give you points with companies that care about that kind of mindset, right? So, the thing that you want to be talking about is the problems you solve, not the screens that you created and stuff like that. So, you can say, I reduced, for example, let me see if there's anything else. So, for example, identified issues. Can you give me an example of the issues that you solved?
Yeah, so issue was like this was something like revamping an old system.
Mhm.
Uh, I mean, revamping an old ticket management system into a new and better system from
Got
the
it.
usability point. Yeah.
Awesome. So that is where you can also say, like, you know what, you're basically saying the load times were long, or there were lots of error states, or people were getting lost. These were the kinds of problems that were there. And what you did was, you basically planned for error states, you planned for, simpler workflows, and you can just highlight those workflows. You don't even have to show the screens. Even if you sketch it in terms of boxes and you show, and you just have to show like one or two hero screens without the context around it. So even if you show a screen that, people won't understand what all went into it, but you can talk about that specific screen in terms of what you did there, and that gives you a lot of value.
Makes sense. So you are saying like if we have a block diagram without having a high fidelity kind of thing,
Yeah,
then
yeah.
it's going to work.
Yeah, I mean, you just have to focus on what problems you solve, right? You don't need to say like, okay, I identified these 11 issues. You say, okay, I solved these, resolved issues, reduced usability issues by 90%. Good, that's an outcome. You don't need to talk more about it. And on the screen, you just literally show block diagrams, or maybe you sketch out the ideas that you had, and you don't need to show the specific screens, and then you show one hero screen. That's it. है ना?
Got
And
it.
the hero screen without the context of the problem, but rather with context of the specific elements that you change to solve those problems.
Got it.
You
And
know?
in case,
Yeah.
yeah, one more question I had. So in case like, as I was a junior in the team and
Mhm.
I have not worked on the usability testing,
Mhm.
then how can I showcase that in the, I mean, in this resume?
Well,
If
what was your job description on that? What were you doing?
Yeah, except I mean, I was not involved in the usability testing. So
Mhm.
I was working till the designing phase. Like I was designing and presenting it to the client, and client was giving it approval, and
Okay.
post that, I mean, yeah, the usability testing part was done by the seniors, and
Okay.
yeah, based on their feedback, then if anything was required, then I used to like reiterate the design.
Okay. So what you did was you did the interaction design component or the visual component, or both?
Both.
Okay. So that's all you can say, right? So you were given a set of usability challenges, or you were made aware of so many problems because of which, the completion rate was X or whatever. And, you basically solved the problem systematically and you brought the completion rate to Y.
Okay.
Right. And it's perfectly okay. I mean, it's okay to say I did not do research. I mean, that's the truth, and that's what you're sharing. That's fine. That's okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. But I think the point being is, you need to be able to, whatever you did, you need to show that you did a really good job and you thought it deeply enough. So that's where, when you show the ideations, all the variations, just sketches of it, right? Just, nice, good sketches of those things. These are idea 1, idea 2, idea 3. How are these ideas different? Why did you choose idea 1 over idea 2? I think those are the kinds of conversations that will get you the job, not, I did this in this artifact, that, because the moment you look at an artifact, you talk about artifacts, in my mind, I'm just thinking you're ready for a junior level job.
Okay.
Right? When you're starting to talk about how you solved a problem, I think you're either a senior individual contributor or you are capable of handling an intent level kind of a conversation. So those are the things that I'm looking for. Okay. But again, if you, I would say, like, think about how you can have those kinds of conversations in your resume.
Sure. Yeah. I'll simplify it based on the feedback that you have.
Cool. So I would say get rid of learnings. Learnings is hidden, right? So this is stuff that, I mean, ideally, this would be the document that you would keep internally, that you would update every month. But, you are rewriting this for your company for whatever job that you would apply for at some point. You're rewriting it and making it easy to read and understand.
Okay.
Okay.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you, Sai. All right. So the next resume. Yeah. All right. Now this one, I had a lot of fun, right? So I mean, I just like really loved this. So, and this was, I think it was Venus, right? And I looked at it and I'm just like, yeah, makes sense. I'm able to read it, understand it. Good. And, I can very clearly see like your experience. Okay. So you were a UI designer from 22 to June 22 to present. So that's like about 6 months. You were a trainee from January to February. So that's 1 month or 7 months. And before that, you were an HR manager. And that's what you did. And I can see that, and I see the progression, and I understand the logic, and and I see, okay, so education wise, that's where the second thing I'm going to do is I'm very quickly going to jump, because project did not make any sense to me, because of Hop Now and Udemy e-learning, I didn't understand really what you did there. Was that like a school project, or was that some other project? I did not know, so I didn't have context on that. Then I look at the education. Okay, so I do see that you've got some kind of a certification in as a product designer. You have an MBA, which in my book is interesting because it tells me that you have that diverse background to understand business. So I kind of feel, okay, good. So you've got a bachelor's in engineering. Okay, fine. That's fairly common in India. So, but the MBA is uncommon. So I kind of see that. I'm like, interesting. So I wonder if that MBA is, if you are leveraging that MBA to do design. So that is what I'm very curious about as a technical person, right? Now, from a recruiting perspective, your right-hand side, the stuff that you have on the right is awesome, because I just see, okay, all the software is there, your visual skills are there, your design skills are there, and you put it in like a nice enough thing, like user-centered design, design thinking, heuristic evaluation, and all that. Now, one advice that I will tell you, okay, under design skills, everybody claims design thinking. Everybody will claim it. So my question is like, well, how are you different? So I think that is something like, if you thought a little bit about that, that would be awesome. Okay. Now, heuristic evaluations is like, okay, you did a heuristic evaluation. Everybody teaches heuristic evaluation. And as a recruiting person, as a hiring manager, Okay, not a big deal, right? If you, instead of a heuristic evaluation, you said, I did a design audit. I know how to do design audits, right? Design audit is heuristic evaluation next level.
Yes.
Okay. Because you're evaluating it, you're auditing it, and you're prioritizing all the issues, and you're now negotiating with your product teams to say which one goes first, second, third, fourth. Okay?
Yes.
That gives me a lot of value, because heuristic evaluation is a theoretical exercise, whereas a design audit is actually something that is impactful for the product team.
Yes.
Okay.
That,
So the question I would ask you is, okay, you did a heuristic evaluation, but what was the outcome? And if at any point you did an evaluation and you sat down and you prioritized and you negotiate with your teams and you use that to improve the product, then you should call it a design audit. Okay.
Yes, sir.
If you haven't done that, then keep it the same as a heuristic evaluation, no problem.
Yes.
Okay. So the right-hand side is very nice, very clear. I can very quickly look at it. And just by looking at it, I can tell that you probably, and this is where the problem is. So under visual skills, you said interaction design.
Yeah.
And again, that classification, now that is where I start flagging stuff like, okay, does she understand or not, right? I mean, what I did was, my first reaction when I just looked at the resume, it made me feel like, okay, this person knows what she's doing or he is doing, because it's very nicely and cleanly organized, so I can understand it, right? And that's a subliminal feeling. Just by looking at it, you judge. I mean, I hate to say that, but most people will make judgments based on how somebody is dressed, right? And I think this is the same equation here. Just by looking at the resume, it made me understand, like, okay, it's organized. It seems to make sense. So this person probably knows what they do. And then as I start drilling into it, like, wait a minute, she defined interaction design as visual skills, wireframing and prototyping as visual skills. Then under design skills, if you can scroll down a little bit, like, most of the stuff seems like it's research centric. There is nothing to do with interaction design. Right now, then I'm going to be asking, well, what is the difference between visual skills and design skills? And that is where you have to kind of make sure your language and the way you're communicating is very, very clear. Okay?
Yes.
So this is the first place where I'm thinking, maybe this person is not ready yet. Okay. Then I'm going to look back at your job description. Okay. Now let's read the items that you said. You developed a new responsive site for e-commerce. You worked with a cross-functional team that included a project manager, software engineer, graphic designer, created low and high fidelity, created a design system. So just by looking at, tells me that you did widget level work, right? But my question is, if that's what you did, it's a fair assessment. Okay. However, if you had higher inputs, if you were like in the, thinking about the larger system, the larger process, I think this is the time to showcase it. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Means right now I'm working on one problem statement. In that, here I am. They have hired me as a UI designer, but right now I'm working as a UX and UI both. It's a startup, so the problem statement which they have given. Can I talk about it over in it? Can I use the because the right now the product is in the research, initial stage research. Maybe after 1 month maybe we'll launch MVP.
Right. So I would say then, until you launch, it is intellectual property, right? It's confidential. But if you can put the problem statement in a way that does not let the competitor take it and copy something, then it's okay, right? However, if you take a problem statement and, you give the problem statement, now the competitor is thinking about it and they're duplicating it, then you're kind of messing with the system.
Okay.
Right?
So maybe indirect way, I can talk about it.
Right. See, most designers are solving, either, understandability, visibility, usability, learnability, these or stickiness, those kinds of problems.
Yes, sir.
Right. So put it in those frameworks, in those general frameworks, rather than specifically saying, okay, this is what my company wanted me to do.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And it would be interesting. So I would actually be very curious to see, like, okay, what problem were you trying to solve and how did you solve it? But again, it depends on the scope, right? I mean, if you wrote that and I got really excited and I talked to you and I realized like, oh yeah, she really didn't do that or she can't answer the questions, then, it might have, a much worse negative experience than necessary.
Yes.
Okay. So be very careful, but, I would love to kind of hear like, okay, designed a new responsive site for e-commerce website, which enhanced user experience and reduced. Okay. So an increased conversion rate by 5, what? So
5.
5 more people converted?
No, by 5%. So should be 5.
Okay. So 5%. So that increased. So then my question is, well, in absolute numbers, what was the previous conversion rate?
Yeah.
Right? If you're saying it's 100 and you got to 105, then okay, you're playing games with me, right? So be very careful how you present those numbers.
Yes.
Okay. But otherwise, I do like that. But think about like, okay, why did you develop a responsive site? What problem were you solving?
So, for example, here my problem was right now we are having the website only. So the user who want to buy the product through mobile or tablet, they were facing problem when they open the website in mobile. It's not responsive. It's pura messy and clunky. So I solved that problem for my user by creating a proper responsive website design.
Got it. And what did you do to make it responsive? Were you doing the design aspects? Like, were you figuring out the layouts or what were you doing?
So here for this project, my complete work was the visual designing.
Hmm.
So we have already the website. So I had converted that into the mobile and the tablet
Right.
design.
Now, this is where you are not getting credit for the work you did. Okay.
Yes.
So you said I just did visual design, but really you didn't do just visual design, right? You actually you looked at that old design and you did a lot of layout planning and you prioritized the content, right? You reordered a lot of the content, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
So, and then you said, well, you reordered all the cards, you redefined the information, you defined the visual hierarchy for it, and then you reset it, isn't it?
Yes, sir. I did.
So, but you didn't say any of that stuff. So you just said, I was told to do the visual design, I did the visual design. But again, the point is you did all the hard work, but you didn't talk about it, so nobody respects it.
Yeah. Yes, sir. I got it.
Right? So break it down and say these were the challenges, these were the problems. They had like 150 modules or whatever, or majority of our customers were accessing through a mobile device. As a result, conversion rates were low. So you basically took on the responsibility. Was it you or you and somebody else?
No, I was only alone.
Awesome. So then you want to talk about, okay, how did you order it? So the question is, how did you order it, right? And again, this would be an interview question, not something. So you want to be sure, like, did you do some kind of task analysis? Did you do some kind of, business, prioritization? What did you do? What was your criteria? Why did you order it that way? How did you set it up? And then you talk about that. And then you say, work with cross-functional teams to include a product manager, software engineer, graphic designer. And I think, created low and high fidelity storyboard. And again, all you're talking about is artifacts.
Yes, sir.
If somebody is talking artifacts, it just basically tells me that somebody managed the hell out of you and made you do all those artifacts. Right? Is that the truth?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So then that's fine, right? So if somebody told you what to do, then that's fine. Okay. But the question is, did you understand why they told you to do those artifacts?
Yeah, because as I'm designing, converting it completely into the responsive. So first I thought to do the layout designing. So for that, I decided to go for paper wireframe and low fidelity wireframe, which help me in thinking that where should what should be the priority of the content and how should I structure the entire thing as I'm converting it into the web to mobile.
So
So
now here's my question. So did somebody tell you to do that or did you do it by yourself?
no, by myself only I have done because there is no one who can guide me. I have
Okay.
done all things by my own way of thinking and what I have learned.
Okay.
And I can
So
say it
now let
was
me ask you a different question. Okay. So when you did these prototypes, why did you choose to do that prototype? Why not a high fidelity prototype? Why a low fidelity prototype?
uh, so here my answer is that I have done something. Now is the time that I need to present to my CEO or to the product manager, and it's an with the help of prototype, it's easy to explain them things by proper. It's maybe it's needed from their side, so I have done to show my work
So
to
this
them
was a
first.
low fidelity prototype. Is that correct?
No, low fidelity, high fidelity prototype.
So you had all the visuals together and stuff like that.
Yes.
Okay. So why did you jump to a high fidelity prototype? Why not do an intermediate low fidelity prototype?
For intermediate low fidelity prototype, I have not done prototyping, but I have done only the designing.
Okay. Why did you do it that way? That's my question. And there is an answer there that will give you a lot of credit, but you're not getting the credit because you're not explaining it.
Yeah. Because I can't jump directly into the directly to high fidelity. Uh, once
Because
because I need to convert all my data content into the mobile,
uh,
and the content is a lot of content, a lot of product detail we are showing on the website. So to know what should be the proper structure of the content, what, as you say, uh, real estate, what should do on the top, what should low, and what users for user wanted to see first on
right.
the first fold. So to structure, to find out, figure out all those things, I decided first to go for paper, and to proper मेरा जो thought process का उसको लाने के लिए पूरा पेपर पे, then I shifted to low fidelity.
Right. So
तब
the
I
answer that
got
you're circling is this. The reason you did low fidelity prototype, low fidelity sketching and all that initially was to reduce the ambiguity and reduce the time it takes to figure out all these solutions.
yes,
Right? Once you figured out the solution, then you went to a high fidelity. That's what you're circling round and round, but you're not saying that, right? Because any person that's hiring would want to understand, like, do you understand the importance of delivering on time? Do you understand the importance of still doing the whole design thinking and saving time, figuring out where to save time and where to be very particular, isn't it?
yeah.
So,
And here
huh,
at this point, I don't want to. I mean, the time was also, if I directly jump on the high fidelity, and if I by mistake I have done something wrong, so it's really मतलब वहाँ बहुत ज़्यादा time खत्म करने. I thought let's do some this low
exactly.
fidelity.
So what you were doing was risk mitigation,
Yeah.
right? I would love to see that there because nobody was there telling you to do that. You thought about it all by yourself. How do I reduce the risk while still doing it at a very fast pace?
Yes.
Isn't it? And I
Yes.
think those are the things, like these are things that you thought about and you would have done. But again, from a hiring manager perspective, I would never know that you thought at that level, isn't it?
Yes.
So that's what the point is. So I would love to see, and this basically indicates that yes, you're capable of being an individual contributor, right? And again, I'm not telling you to lie, I'm not telling you to misrepresent yourself, but I am saying that whatever you've done, represent it. So because hiring managers care, okay, you save time, you have like multiple perspectives. You're also thinking about the complexity of the design. You're also thinking about how quickly you can, all the stuff that you were thinking about and how you got to that process that you did.
Yes. I got
Okay.
point.
And I think that would be really, really interesting because right now this thing looks like you just did a lot of individual work, which is a junior IC level work.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
I got.
Yeah. And then worked on user-centered design by understanding business requirements, gathered requirements by performing 28, ideated design, translated concepts into 38 low and high fidelity wireframes. And again, I don't care whether you did 38 low and high fidelity wireframes. I'm just curious about what the outcome was. Like, what was the outcome in this case? Like, what was the business outcome? What was your customer outcome, or what was your boss's reaction to it?
Yeah. Yes.
You know? And then you did it in a limited amount of time. So what were the constraints that you were working under? So I would love to see that and get that. Now, the last experience that you have, I still want to talk, because a lot of people say, I've got this experience, but I don't know if it's relevant or not. Okay. So you said you were a HR manager for 1 year.
Yes.
Right? Slightly more than a year. But you collaborated with top management, played an effective role in solving employee problems, recruited, understood well. My thing is, what problems did you solve? Because I would love to see if you were a problem solver in the HR role. Because even in design, if you're a problem solver, now I can see the continuity of your thought process.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
So, yes. So here on the daily basis, I used to talk with my employee in my last organization. I tried to build an empathy with them, ki what types of problem they are facing and how can I solve by talking with my higher management.
Yeah, and
So
that term is called what? Feedback loop, right? You built an effective feedback loop to ensure that the data was coming from the ground and it was very quickly resolved and implemented. You
yes,
know? So
yes,
that is solving a problem,
yes,
right? Now, recruiting, onboarding, okay, this is something that every every HR person will do. But what did you do different?
yes,
Right? I mean, I'm very curious about perspective. So if you have a unique perspective, a different way of doing things, or a different, how you approached it, I think that will give you credit.
yes,
Okay. Just what it is right now, I don't know whether it is relevant or not. In fact, I would not give you credit for that. Right. I would treat you like somebody who's got like about 8 or 9 months or like 9 months of experience.
yes,
Right? However, if you put that, I would say 9 months of experience plus maturity. In my mind, I think you're mature because you understand the business environment, right? And remember, going back to your MBA, so that's where I would be very intrigued in you as a candidate.
yes, I got it.
Okay. Now the project is Hop Now community app and all this. What is this?
So this project I have done during my boot camp.
Okay. Now you haven't explained it, right?
Yes,
And you haven't even told me what impact it has, right? And again, if you already have experience and you don't need to talk about your bootcamp. And again, this is something that I tell even our intensive folks. If you are already working in a company, leverage the problems that you've solved in your company. Don't talk about the problems you're solving as part of your training, right? Because you get more credit there. And again, it's wasted real estate for you.
yes,
Okay. So, but overall, I think you understood the layout, but it's the content that threw you off.
yes, got
Okay,
it.
cool. But good job, Venus. I mean, just by looking at it made me feel good. So I think that was a good job. And thank you for,
Thank
coming on and talking and sharing your video and sharing your perspectives. It takes a lot of courage. And like I tell everybody, it's not that you are looking for a job. Rather, it's just that, you should be doing it on a monthly basis so you don't forget about it and you're keeping your experience, you're documenting it appropriately. So good job. It's a good start.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the feedback.
Cool. Awesome. Any questions or thoughts, guys, before we end this?
I had one question side is side.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, uh, I still think like there is lot to learn being a junior UX designer. So
Mhm.
I just wanted to know like how does people who are in the senior uh, position in the design space, how do they look at us? I mean, at the junior guys or who are having just 1 year of experience.
See, I think the way I like to break it down is somebody who's freshly graduating. Okay. And I'm going to break it down because I know that's not a question you asked, but I'm going to take a step lower because I know there are people that have that question. So somebody is graduating. I'm basically looking at discipline, mindset, and tool competence, and subject matter understanding. Okay. So those are the things that I'm looking, or actually passion, tool competence and passion, because, I know for sure that they're going to get a lot of feedback, and, they have to be able to understand that feedback. If I give them feedback, this doesn't work, and they get upset with me and they don't learn, then there's nothing I can do really to help them grow in their career. So that is where I'm looking at passion, because passion helps people grow and take that feedback and move forward. So that's the basic stuff. Now, when I'm looking at somebody with a year's worth of experience, I basically look for people who have solved problems, right? Or at least I want to see that they have tried to solve problems on their own. Of course, I understand that with a year's worth of experience, you probably have somebody giving you feedback or, giving you guidance and stuff like that. But really, what was your contribution? What was your unique thought process? How do you know you succeeded? I think those kinds of questions, I want to see that ability to introspect about the work you have done, as well as, I'm very curious about, how you are describing the problem and how you're describing the solution, because it tells me at what level you thought about the problem. Okay. Now, unfortunately, this is something that I find is people who, do really good work. And this is something, I've seen it time and again, is like, it takes a lot of questions to really understand that this person is genuinely good, right? And because they do good work, they have that thought process, but they really, don't spend the time and energy in figuring out how to communicate what they've done, right? And I think that is also a skill that I'm looking for. With 1 year of experience, do you have that ability to write? Do you have that ability to very crisply communicate what you have done? Because then that tells me like, okay, this person is able to go to the next level. So this is something that I definitely look at. And from a senior perspective, I still understand, okay, you can work as an individual contributor, but do you have that ability to say, okay, I need help and I'm going to a senior and ask them for help? Or I'm also looking at, do you have an opinion and can you defend that opinion? Okay, so those are the kinds of things that I would be looking for in these individuals with at least a year's worth of experience. Does that answer your question, Sai?
Yeah. It completely makes sense.
Cool. Awesome. So let's see. So Wasim says, if you shift from UX to UX after working in other fields, will there be an effect of salary? Again, see, you work for 5 years painting a house and then you become a designer, right? Will you get credit for it? Probably not, right? Because those are two completely different disciplines. Versus if you are, you're working as a graphic designer and you're kind of moving into UX and you understand UX, yeah, I will probably give you credit or partial credit for the experience that you have. But by and large, that's not even an issue, because UX salaries are high enough that, just shifting gives you that opportunity. It'll automatically put you on a higher salary range anyways. But, again, it depends on how you are able to connect both your experiences and move forward. Does that answer your question, Wasim? All right. Garima, you want to ask your question?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, go ahead.
सर ऐसा मैं जैसे ग्राफिक डिजाइनर से वर्क कर रही हूँ अभी इंटर्नशिप में सर वहाँ पे मैं एज वैसे बेसिकली बैनर्स वगैरह बनाती हूँ बट दे टोल्ड मी टू वर्क ऑन कलर एंड फॉन्ट तो सर मैंने स्टडी किया था तो वो डिजाइन सिस्टम एज अ पार्ट ऑफ यूएक्स आ रहा है तो आई एम लिटिल बिट कंफ्यूज कि मुझे किस रोल में इंक्लाइनेशन जा रहा है कि यूएक्स में जा रहा है यूआई में जा रहा है एंड जब मैं अपना रिज्यूमे शेयर करूंगी एज अ फ्रेशर तो मुझे ये चीजें मेरा जो एक्सपीरियंस है वो रेलेवेंट रहेगा नहीं रहेगा कैसे मतलब देना चाहिए
Good. So really good question. I'm just going to rephrase what you asked in English so that everybody gets it. This is
Yes,
one thing
sir.
that I learned is, we have people from all around India. And
Yes, sir.
sometimes when I lapse into a specific language and I can speak both Telugu and Hindi reasonably well, then the other side gets upset with me because they don't understand. So I'm going to just speak, rephrase. What you're saying is you're working as a graphic designer right now.
Yes,
So,
sir.
and they're asking you like, okay, hey, have you done, look at colors and typography or fonts or some element,
Yes,
and you realize that that's actually a design system discussion.
yeah. Yes, sir.
So, if you did a design system, would you get credit for it?
Yes, sir.
Right? And my answer is absolutely you will get credit. And this is something that I tell a lot of people is, you don't have to have your title change to, a UX designer before you're doing UX. Okay. You can be doing UX as a graphic designer. That's fine, because it's literally you're thinking at that level, right? So if you're able to prove that you're thinking at that level, nobody cares, right? Because when you write your resume, you'll write your resume that way. So because if you're just doing colors and fonts without thinking design systems, the way you would write it is, okay, I made this into a visually appealing design, right? But if you did design systems, you're actually now saying like, okay, you created a scalable experience, right? A scalable visual experience that could then be scaled to any number of pages or any number of experiences, isn't it? That's what design systems does. It's a framework to scale your design, right? So how you describe it gives you the credit. So if you said, I created a scalable system, people will ask you, how did you scale it? What were you thinking? What is the difference between graphic design and visual design? They will ask you all those questions. But if you're able to satisfy them, you'll definitely get credit as a UX designer. Okay. So my advice is, do not worry about what your job title is, right? If you want to do UX, start doing UX today itself, right? And if anything, if your company is paying you as a graphic designer, they're probably happy because they're getting a higher order of thinking as opposed to what they're paying for. Okay. So you do what you do. So your quality is independent of the amount of money you get paid. Keep delivering the best quality and the money will automatically add up to you at some point.
Okay.
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 Cool.
Thank you, sir.
Awesome. So let's see. Wasim says, I see a lot of foreign job descriptions. Every company is asking for a master's degree. Is it necessary to get a job? So again, this is interesting. When you're applying in foreign, when you want to go abroad and apply to companies outside, you also have to worry about visa regimes, right? So for example, if you're trying to immigrate to, let's say, the US or Europe or, Singapore or wherever, the one question they will ask you is, what degree do you have that proves that you know your subject matter? And the easiest way to, how can you prove? I think it's not even degree. How can you prove that you know what you know, right? Or what you claim you know? So the simplest answer is, if you have a degree, you can say, I have a degree, a master's degree or a bachelor's degree in this domain. And therefore, I have been certified by, a competent authority in my company that says that I know this domain. Good. That's one way you can do it. There's also ways where you can say, yeah, I have a degree, but I worked in a different space. But I have 10 years of experience. Here's my work experience letter and stuff like that. And you can prove it. So I think the question there is not, and again, when you're going abroad, you also have to understand that you're going to be on a visa. Okay. You go to the company and let's say the company and the protections for foreign workers are definitely a lot lower than a domestic worker. Okay. So if you're a foreign worker coming into the country to work in that country and the company realizes that you don't know what you're talking about and you're not competent, it's very easy for that company to say, yep, we are canceling your visa. Thank you very much. Right. So you don't want to be in that situation where you claim that you know something, you've gone to a foreign country and your visa is cancelled and you're stuck in that country. Now you don't know what to do. So it's a very, very it's a very different kind of a system. But again, specifically coming to the question that you're saying, Wasim, is, yeah, having a degree helps you prove for visa purposes or for, compliance purposes that you know what you know, right? It also makes it easy for the other company to kind of say, okay, yeah, if you have a degree, yeah, you must know what you know. And so that definitely makes it easier for the company to hire you. But I've also seen examples of people that do not have formal degrees, but have a lot of good experience and are able to get jobs and move on. So I do not see that necessarily as as the only reason, but degrees help. If you don't have a degree but you have the experience, that's still good enough. Hopefully that answers your question, Wasim. All right, guys. So
one last one, a small one from my side.
Who's there?
This is Sai. Can I ask?
Yeah, go ahead, Sai. Sai, if you don't turn on your camera, I don't know who you are, man. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Let me just switch it on. Actually, some camera issue was happening. That's why I was not able to turn it on.
Yeah, that you have to solve, man. That's your job.
Yeah, I'll do that
Go
next
ahead.
time.
Yeah.
My question was like, why do some design leaders look for degrees or long-term study when freshers are applying for job? And how can we overcome that kind of situation when they're saying, uh, I mean, we only look for people. I mean, I prioritize people who come from at least uh, a long-term UX design course or a MBA degree or something like that. So this is a scenario which I faced when I was giving interview, and the senior leader, he just told me the same thing. Uh, but yeah, I couldn't overcome that. But yeah, he gave me a challenge. I was able to solve that challenge, and that's how I got in to the company.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I just wanted to know, like, how can we overcome this kind of questions?
See, I think what you did was right. You just said, give me a chance, let me prove myself, right? And this is where, I think you need to strategize your career planning. And this is what you need to be very systematically approaching how you're doing it. So, if I'm a leader in a big company, you know, I don't have time to invest in, and again, because I have a lot of goals and targets and, I have to go achieve it. There's a lot of pressure in not even a big company, in any company, there's a lot of pressure to achieve goals and outcomes. All right. So in those kinds of situations, my deal is like it's very hard for a leader to say, okay, I'm going to hire somebody and I'm going to somehow train them and magically, because there's so many variables in there that can go wrong. So the person may not understand what I'm talking about, or they may not be able to learn, or you know, they don't, uh, again, there could be lots of different reasons why it may not work out. So usually, if you look for somebody with a background or a degree or whatever, you just find people who at least understand a lot more than other folks, right? But today, the business, or at least the way it's going, is a lot of people that I interact with and all that, everybody kind of automatically says, you know what, I want to go with people with some level of experience, because at least though they know what they want to do and they want to kind of grow in their career. I don't want to invest in people that are fresh off, a program, or, just out, because it's probably too much work on my side to kind of get them ready. Right. And that's a reality. And again, most of these training programs, you know, if you follow my trainings and if you follow everything I talk about, you'll realize most of the stuff I talk about is not about tools. I never talk about Adobe. I never talk about Figma. I never talk about all of that stuff. I talk about how you think, how you solve problems, right? Because that is what people want. And if you look at most of the training programs, they are purely focused on teaching you Adobe, Figma, Photoshop, whatever. But what's the point of learning all of those if you cannot solve problems? Because as a design company or as a designer, my goal or my team's goal is to solve problems. Right. And I think that is something that is also varying against, people who are just coming out of any kind of training because, do you know a tool or do you know how to solve problems? Because that is something that I would also want to look for and understand. So, overall, I think, yeah, having a degree helps you get your foot in the door, but that is not a guarantee that you're going to be a success in your job. And even if you don't have a degree, it doesn't mean that you are always permanently banned, right? You build your experience, you build your portfolio, you can apply into those same jobs, and then you kind of move in, right? There's nothing, because at the end of the day, for people who are fresh, people are looking at degrees, but people with some level of experience, they're going to look at what experience you had and how you can enrich my experience. They're not bothered about, where you got your degree or what you got your degree in. I mean, that becomes a smaller component. And just FYI, like Google, a company that basically says earlier when they started off, they would only hire people from like these Ivy Leagues, Berkeley, Stanfords, and all that. Today, they're at the level where they say, I don't care about degrees. If you can do the job, come join my company. I mean, that company that was so like narrow in its focus is now basically saying, I just want it. So again, the lack of a degree should not stop you from being successful. Just so, as long as you have the passion and you have the motivation and you're kind of nailing it every day, you're working towards it, that's good.
Got it. Yeah.
Does it answer your question, Sai?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. And this is also, I also want to talk about this other aspect. I mean, just because we did this research about 3 years ago, and we looked at, we found there were two types of designers, right? One type of designer was the active learners, and the others were the structured learners. Okay. And the funny thing was, most active learners started their career slow, but they moved up very, very fast. The structured learners started their career fast, but they stagnated very, very quickly. And when we went in and we tried to understand, okay, why were some people stagnating and some people accelerating, we realized that, again, there are exceptions to the rule, but a lot of people that were structured learners were people that had degrees, right? Because they were assumed whatever is in the textbook is correct, and I don't need to learn anything else. I don't need to do anything else. So whatever was in the textbook, that was great. But when they go into a work environment, the biggest complaint there, nobody follows the process. Nobody understands UX. I'm frustrated. I'm at some point they kind of stagnate and they stop off. Right. And I mean, I would challenge you, like, just go on LinkedIn and search for how many people, like, look at the titles, right? These design colleges, the top design colleges, and just search and see how many people are freelancers from those places. Right. And then when you look at the active learners, these guys know that they don't have a degree, and they're basically going to be in every forum, every training, Coursera, Udemy, some workshop, wherever they are at all those places. They're consuming information left, right, and center. And what happens is, just because they're consistent and they're working harder and they're basically practicing and thinking more and more, these guys accelerate towards the later part of their career, and they don't really have a glass ceiling. So again, goes to say that degrees are not the decision-making point for success. Cool. Thank you very much, guys. Have a great night. And, the next class that we're going to be streaming live is on variabilization. We're going to do that on Sunday at 6 p.m. And this is the one skill that I would actually say, like, if you understand variabilization and you know how to variabilize, right, you can pretty much solve any problem that is given to you, including, like, how do I get a job I'm interviewing for? How do I, get people to agree to what I'm saying? How do I build credibility within my company? Or how do I build influence? So these are all things. Like, variabilization is a really simple, concept, but it has a lot of impact. So for those of you that are interested, we're going to put this on YouTube. We're going to do this variabilization class and put it up there. So stay tuned. And if you haven't already subscribed for this class, do subscribe on, if you haven't subscribed for YouTube, do subscribe and make sure that you are getting notified when the club program starts. All right. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.